There are moments in a person's life when silence is not absence, but surveillance. This is one of those moments. The title of this message is not poetic language, and it is not symbolic exaggeration. It is a literal spiritual reality unfolding right now. Archangel Michael had been watching in silence, not because nothing was happening, but because everything was being made. Heaven does not rush when eternity is involved. It observes, it weighs, it records, and for a long time, you have been under that kind of observation. While you were questioning why prayers seemed unanswered, while you were wondering why battles kept repeating, while you were trying to understand why progress felt delayed, the silence was not neglect. It was restraint. It was heaven holding back action until the exact moment when intervention would not only help you, but permanently alter the outcome of your life. This message comes with urgency because it marks the end of the silence. When the title says a secret conversation about you will happen tonight, it is revealing something few people ever hear, that your life has reached a point where heaven itself must speak internally before moving externally. There are conversations that happen on earth about people, and then there are conversations that happen in the spiritual realm that decide timelines, permissions, and outcomes. You are not aware of most of them, but they shape everything. And tonight is not random. Tonight is not metaphorical. It is a spiritual timestamp. A moment when what has been watched quietly is about to be addressed openly in the unseen realm. Archangel Michael did not watch casually. His assignments are not observational in the human sense. When he watches, it is because conflict is involved. When he remains silent, it is because authority is being prepared. Michael is not sent to negotiate emotions. He is sent to enforce divine boundaries. His silence over your life has meant that something serious has been unfolding. Something that required patience, legality, and timing in the courts of heaven. There were lines that could not be crossed until all evidence was complete. There were forces that could not be confronted until permission was granted. And that is why this message carries weight. Because silence at this level always precedes movement at a level you cannot stop. You may have felt this season as heaviness without clarity, pressure without explanation, a sense that something was building but no visible sign of resolution. That feeling was accurate. Heaven was watching how you responded under strain, how you carried faith when answers were delayed, how you spoke when you were tired, how you endured when walking away would have been easier. Every reaction mattered. Every choice was noted. This is why the title says God has allowed one final intervention. Allowed is a legal word. It means something was previously restricted. It means there were reasons action could not yet occur. And it means those reasons have now been addressed. This is not about fear. It is about precision. When God allows an intervention at this level, it is not to frighten. It is to finish. There are cycles that cannot continue, patterns that cannot repeat, pressures that cannot escalate further. The silence has gone on as long as it could without costing you something irrecoverable. And now heaven is stepping in, not emotionally but decisively. This is why this message is coming to you now and not earlier. Earlier, you would not have understood it. Earlier, the timing would not have matched the permission. Earlier, the intervention would not have held. The title also warns that this message will not be something. That unfinished sentence is intentional, because some messages are not meant to be replayed, repeated, or casually consumed. Some messages are warnings wrapped in mercy. Some are announcements disguised as explanations. This is one of them. It is not meant to entertain you. It is meant to position you. Once heaven speaks, neutrality ends. Awareness becomes responsibility. And that is why you are hearing this now, before the conversation happens, not after. God often informs before he intervenes, because obedience after awareness determines how intervention unfolds. Understand this clearly. Archangel Michael watching in silence does not mean you were unprotected. It means protection was active but restrained. There is a difference. Restrained protection allows testing without destruction. It allows pressure without collapse. It allows opposition without defeat. You were never abandoned. You were being preserved for a moment that required you to still be standing. And you are. Which is why this message matters. Which is why tonight matters. Which is why the silence is about to break. As you listen, do not rush ahead in your mind. Do not try to predict what this intervention will look like. Heaven does not move according to human imagination. It moves according to divine order. All you need to recognize right now is this. You are not overlooked. You are not late. And you are not forgotten. You are watched. You are known. And the weight you've been carrying has not been invisible. The silence was real, but so was the attention behind it. And what comes next is not accidental. It is authorized. There is a reason the message does not say soon or one day, but very specifically points to tonight. In the language of heaven, timing is never casual. God does not operate with vague windows. He moves with appointed moments. Tonight represents a convergence of patience completed, of evidence reviewed, of endurance validated. This is not about the clock on your wall, but about a spiritual hour that has been forming over a long period of time. An hour when what has been held back can finally be released without being wasted, misused, or prematurely exposed. Heaven chose tonight because something reached completion. Not perfection, but fulfillment. There is a difference. Fulfillment means you endured long enough. You learned enough. You were refined enough. You resisted enough. You stayed when leaving felt justified. You believed when logic argued otherwise. That is why tonight carries authority. It is the moment where heaven can say it is enough. Enough waiting. Enough pressure. Enough testing. Enough silence. And when heaven declares enough, it does not whisper, it acts. You may wonder why it could not have happened earlier. Why not last month, last year, or at the beginning of this struggle? The answer is simple but not easy. Earlier intervention would have interrupted a process that was shaping you into someone who could carry what comes next. Some blessings collapse people who are not prepared. Some doors destroy character when they open too soon. Heaven does not just protect outcomes. It protects you from receiving things before you are strong enough to keep them. Tonight marks the moment when protection no longer requires delay. Another reason heaven chose tonight is because opposing forces overstepped. There are boundaries in the unseen realm that cannot be crossed indefinitely. Resistance is permitted. Destruction is not. Delay is allowed. Derailment is not. There comes a moment when continued pressure becomes illegal in the spiritual sense. That moment has arrived. The silence you experienced was not permission for harm. It was allowance for exposure. What was hidden has now revealed itself enough to be judged. And judgment in heaven always precedes intervention on earth. This is also why the title speaks of a secret conversation. Heaven does not announce everything publicly. Some decisions are made quietly to prevent interference. When God convenes discussion about a person's life, it is not to debate his power, it is to establish order. Tonight is about order being restored, about lines being redrawn, about authority being reassigned. You may not hear words audibly, but you will feel the shift. Restlessness may give way to clarity. Pressure may begin to loosen. confusion may start losing its grip. These are not coincidences. They are indicators that timing has changed. Heaven chose tonight because your awareness has caught up with your assignment. There were seasons when you would have misinterpreted this message. You might have panicked, doubted, or dismissed it. And now, something in you recognizes the seriousness without fear. You sense weight, not anxiety. You sense importance, not drama. That internal recognition is proof of readiness. God does not speak heavy words to unprepared hearts. Tonight, you are able to hear without breaking. It is also important to understand that tonight is not only about what God will do, but about what will no longer be allowed. Some things end not with noise, but with permission being revoked. Certain delays expire. Certain access points close. Certain cycles lose their power because time runs out on them. Heaven chose tonight because expiration hath been reached. What had an allowance no longer does. What had time has used it up. As you are listening to this, you are not outside of the process. You are part of it. Awareness aligns you. Agreement positions you. That is why engagement matters in moments like this. When something resonates deeply, it is often because it is touching an active spiritual reality, not a theoretical one. If this message is stirring recognition in you, respond to it. Let your response be visible, like the video as an act of alignment. Comment to mark your agreement. Share it with someone who may also be under silent pressure. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Not out of habit, but as a way of staying connected to messages that carry this kind of timing. These actions are not about algorithms. They are about participation. Heaven chose tonight because movement requires witnesses, not spectators, but participants who recognize what is happening and do not ignore it. When you engage, you are not amplifying content, you are acknowledging truth. And acknowledgement is powerful. It signals readiness. It signals agreement. It signals that when intervention begins, you will not resist it out of fear or confusion. Do not underestimate the importance of being here at this exact moment. Many people are alive, but not many are attentive. Many are busy, but not many are aligned. Tonight is for the aligned. For those who stayed through silence. For those who did not quit during delay. For those who sensed something was coming even when there was no evidence yet. Heaven chose tonight because you are here to hear it. And that alone tells you this moment is not accidental, it is appointed. There are conversations that never reach human ears, yet decide human outcomes. This is one of them. When the title says a secret conversation about you will happen tonight, it is not symbolic language meant to sound mysterious. It is a revelation of spiritual process. Heaven does not act without communication, and when God allows dialogue about a specific individual, it means that person's life has reached a point of consequence. Your name is not being mentioned casually. It is being spoken with history attached to it, with records, with timelines, with moments you remember and moments you don't. Nothing about you is being summarized. Everything is being reviewed. This conversation is not about whether God knows your heart. He already does. It is about what must now change because of what He knows. Heaven has been watching how long you endured without recognition, how you carried weight without applause, how you kept going when it felt like silence was the only response you received. Every delay you survived added substance to this moment. Every unanswered prayer added context. And tonight, that context is being addressed, not emotionally but judicially. This is how divine order works. God does not rush to fix, He moves to establish. You need to understand who is involved in this conversation. It is not chaos. It is not confusion. It is not debate. It is alignment. When Archangel Michael is present, it means enforcement is being discussed. When God allows review, it means decision is near. Your life is not being questioned. It is being defended. Your delays are not being used against you. They are being used as proof. Proof that you did not quit. Proof that you did not fold under pressure. Proof that you remained standing when circumstances tried to redefine you. There are things about your journey that only heaven saw. Moments when you held back words you could have spoken. Moments when you chose restraint over reaction. Moments when you stayed quiet not because you were weak, but because you trusted God to speak for you. Those moments matter now. They are not forgotten. They are not minimized. They are part of the reason this conversation is happening at all. Many people want breakthrough, but few are willing to be reviewed. You were reviewed without knowing it, and you passed without being told. This is also why the conversation is secret. Not everything God does is meant to be explained publicly. Some protection requires privacy. Some shifts require silence until they are complete. If you knew everything that was discussed, you might try to interfere with your own outcome through fear, impatience, or overreaction. So heaven speaks quietly first. Action follows later. This protects you. It ensures that what is decided cannot be reversed by doubt or disturbed by outside influence. You may have felt recently like something was hovering, like a decision was pending. That sense was accurate. It was not anxiety, it was anticipation. Your spirit recognized movement before your mind could explain it. This is what happens when heaven prepares to act. The atmosphere changes before circumstances do. Restlessness increases not because something bad is coming, but because something unresolved is being resolved. Tonight is resolution territory. And now comes the part that carries weight. This conversation does not happen often. It happens when God decides that allowing things to continue as they are would cause more harm than stepping in. That is why the title says God has allowed one final intervention. Final does not mean punishment. Final means decisive. It means no more extensions. No more prolonged testing. No more cycles repeating under different names. It means intervention with authority, not experimentation. This message will not be repeated because moments like this are not repeated. They are gross. Once crossed, there is no returning to the same level of silence. Something shifts permanently. You may not see everything change at once, but you will feel that the waiting has expired, that the pressure has a limit now, that the outcome is no longer uncertain. That sense of how long begins to dissolve. This is not hype. It is alignment. Let this be clear. Hearing this message means you are within range of the decision, not outside of it. You are not listening as an observer. You are listening as the subject. And that is why awareness matters so deeply right now. This is not the time to be passive. It is the time to be receptive. To be steady. To be open without trying to control the process. Heaven is already speaking. Your role is to stay aligned with what is being decided. Type "I receive divine alignment" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 819 is now activated. As this divine conversation unfolds, hear my voice as an invitation, not from me, but through me. When you sow into this mission, you are placing oil into a lamp that guides lost souls through darkness. God is saying, what you release into my work, I will multiply back into your life. This message is reaching hearts because heaven has opened a channel, and you can help keep it open. If the Spirit stirs you, respond now through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, with a link waiting for you in the description or the QR code appearing before you. This is not a donation. It is a prophetic response to what God is doing tonight. I speak blessing over every seed sown. May open heavens follow your obedience. Act now, and let your obedience echo in eternity. When Archangel Michael is mentioned, heaven is signaling that what is unfolding is not ordinary. Michael is not dispatched for emotional comfort or gentle reassurance. His presence indicates enforcement, protection, and decisive spiritual action. He is assigned when conflict has reached a level where authority must be exercised, not negotiated. That is why his silence over your life has been so significant. Silence for Michael does not mean inactivity. It means preparation. It means restraint under command. It means heaven was waiting for the exact moment when his intervention would be both justified and irreversible. Michael's assignment concerning you is not reactive. It is strategic. Heaven does not respond to chaos. It governs it. There were forces pressing against your life that could not be confronted prematurely. Not because God lacked power, but because premature confrontation can prolong battles instead of ending them. Timing determines outcome. And Michael's assignment is always tied to timing. When he moves, it is because the moment for decisive resolution has arrived. You may have wondered why certain struggles felt unusually intense, why opposition seemed persistent even when you were doing everything right. That is often a sign that what you are carrying matters more than you realize. Michael is assigned to guard destinies that are contested, paths that are resisted, and callings that threaten existing spiritual order. His watch over you means your life has been marked as significant enough to require high-level oversight. That is not meant to inflate ego. It is meant to clarify responsibility. Michael's role is not to fight random battles. It is to enforce divine boundaries. There are lines in the spiritual realm that, once crossed, require immediate response. His silence indicated those lines had not yet been crossed. Until now. Something shifted. Something attempted to go further than it was permitted. And when that happens, Michael does not ask questions. He acts on command. That command is what has been forming during this season of silence. This assignment also reveals something about you. Heaven does not assign Michael to lives that are drifting without purpose. His presence confirms that your path intersects with something larger than personal comfort. There is impact connected to your obedience. There is influence tied to your endurance. And there is protection assigned because what you are moving toward cannot be left exposed. This is why the intervention is not subtle. Subtlety would not be sufficient. Authority is required. Understand this clearly. Michael's assignment is not only about stopping what hath been opposing you. It is also about securing what is ahead of you. Protection is not just defensive. It is positional. It creates space for movement. It clears pathways. It ensures that when you step forward, you are not immediately pushed back by unseen resistance. This is why heaven waited. Because once this assignment activates, the conditions around you change. You may not see an angelic figure. You may not hear a sound. But you will notice shifts. Things that once strained you will lose their grip. Confusion will begin to lift. Repeated obstacles will start breaking pattern. This is how enforcement manifests in the natural world, through changes in pressure, access, and momentum. When Michael enforces, resistance does not always disappear instantly, but it loses authority. And resistance without authority cannot sustain itself. It is also important to understand that Michael's assignment carries accountability. When protection increases, expectation increases. When authority is released around you, responsibility follows. This is not about fear. It is about alignment. Heaven does not clear paths so you can wander aimlessly. It clears paths so you can move forward intentionally. This is why awareness matters. You are being brought into a season where indecision will feel uncomfortable. Not because God is impatient, but because the environment around you will no longer support stagnation. Michael's silence ending does not mean chaos is coming. It means order is being restored. His presence stabilizes. It brings structure to situations that have felt unstable. It draws clear lines where things were previously blurred. That clarity may feel intense at first, especially if you have grown used to uncertainty. But clarity is a gift. It removes the exhausting need to constantly question what is happening. It replaces guessing with knowing. This assignment also signals that what you have been carrying privately is about to be acknowledged spiritually, not publicly, not for applause, but in the realm that actually determines outcomes. Heaven recognizes endurance even when people do not. Heaven honors faithfulness even when it goes unnoticed. Michael's involvement confirms that your quiet obedience has not been wasted. It hath been stored, counted, and now activated. As this part of the message settles in, let it recalibrate how you see your past season. What felt like delay was actually positioning. What felt like silence was actually oversight. What felt like pressure was actually preparation. And now, the assignment shifts from watching to enforcing, from observing to acting, from silence to movement. This is not the beginning of a battle. It is the beginning of resolution. And when heaven assigns Michael, resolution is not temporary, it is established. There are battles you recognize, and then there are battles you never knew were happening. This part of the message reveals the latter. While you were dealing with visible challenges, fatigue, delay, misunderstanding, resistance, there were accusations forming in a realm you could not access. Not spoken by people, not written in words, but formed through patterns, pressure, and persistent opposition. Accusations in the spiritual sense are not always lies. Sometimes they are twisted interpretations of truth, used to justify delay, restriction, or resistance. And that is what makes them dangerous. They sound reasonable, even when they are wrong. These accusations were not aimed at destroying you outright. They were aimed at exhausting you, wearing you down slowly, questioning your consistency, highlighting your weakest moments while ignoring your growth, pointing to your fatigue and calling it failure, pointing to your questions and calling them doubt, pointing to your silence and calling it retreat. You never heard these accusations, but you felt their effects. That is why certain seasons felt heavier than the circumstances alone could explain. You were not just fighting life. You were under review. Understand this clearly. Accusation does not mean guilt. It means examination. Heaven allows examination because it produces clarity. But examination has a limit. It cannot go on indefinitely. At some point, evidence outweighs accusation. Endurance outweighs pressure. Faithfulness outweighs fatigue. And that point has been reached. The accusations you never heard have now lost their leverage because they no longer align with the full picture of who you are and what you have become. You may have felt moments when it seemed like everything you did was being questioned. Like no matter how much effort you gave, it was not enough. Like every step forward came with scrutiny instead of celebration. That feeling was not imagined. It was the residue of accusation. When accusations are active, peace feels interrupted. Progress feels resisted. Confidence feels unstable. But here's the truth. Accusations cannot stand forever. They require ongoing justification. And once that justification collapses, they fall on their own. Heaven does not ignore accusations. It answers them, not with arguments, but with evidence. And your life has been providing that evidence quietly. Every time you chose restraint instead of reaction. Every time you stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Every time you trusted God without reassurance. Every time you kept your integrity under pressure. These moments accumulated. They formed a record. And that record is now speaking louder than any accusation ever could. This is why the silence lasted as long as it did. Silence allowed the accusations to fully expose themselves, to show their intent, to reveal whether they were about refinement or obstruction. And once that was clear, silence was no longer required. Intervention became necessary. Accusations that continue after clarity are no longer corrective. They are oppressive. Heaven does not tolerate oppression against those who have been proven faithful. There is something important you must understand here. The accusations were never about your worth. They were about your timing. They sought to delay, not deny. To stall, not erase. To keep you questioning instead of moving. That is why they often targeted your mind more than your circumstances. Confusion is a common byproduct of accusation. When you start questioning your own clarity, momentum slows. And slowing momentum with a goal. But now, momentum is returning. Not suddenly, not chaotically, but steadily. The lifting of accusation feels like relief without explanation. Like pressure easing without obvious cause. Like clarity returning where fog once dominated. This is not coincidence. It is the result of accusations losing their authority. When authority is removed, influence follows. And when influence fades, peace begins to surface again. You may notice that things which once provoked intense emotional reactions no longer carry the same weight. That is another sign. Accusations thrive on reaction. They weaken when reaction disappears. Your ability to remain steady, even now, is proof that something has shifted. You are not as vulnerable to internal disruption as you once were. That vulnerability was never a flaw, it was a phase. And that phase is closing. Do not revisit the accusations in your mind. Do not rehearse what went wrong or what you could have done differently. That season is not asking for analysis, it is asking for release. Heaven has already addressed what needed to be addressed. Your role now is not to defend yourself internally, but to stay aligned externally. Accusations lose their final grip when you stop agreeing with them emotionally. This part of the message is meant to free you, not burden you. You were never failing. You were being tested. You were never abandoned. You were being observed. You were never delayed without reason. You were being positioned. And now, the accusations you never heard no longer have a voice in the outcome of your life. What remains is clarity, movement, and the quiet assurance that heaven has spoken on your behalf. There comes a moment when heaven no longer waits for improvement, adjustment, or gradual change. It intervenes. Not because God is impatient, but because continuation would cause more damage than interruption. This is what the phrase "one final intervention" truly means. It does not suggest threat. It signals mercy with authority. It is the point where God steps in personally, not to experiment, but to conclude. To settle what has remained unsettled. To close what has remained open. To stop what has gone on long enough. God's permission is central here. Nothing in the spiritual realm moves without it. Forces may pressure, accuse, delay, or resist, but they cannot overstep divine permission indefinitely. Permission has limits, and when those limits are reached, heaven responds decisively. This intervention is called final not because God will never act again in your life, but because this particular season of contention, delay, and testing is reaching its end. What follows will not resemble what preceded it. For a long time, God allowed processes to unfold naturally. He allowed character to be refined, faith to be strengthened, motives to be purified. But allowance is not endorsement. Just because something is permitted for a time does not mean it is meant to continue forever. This is where many people misunderstand God's patience. Patience is purposeful, not passive. It has an end point, and you have reached it. This final intervention is different from the help you may have hoped for earlier. Earlier, you wanted relief, and now you need resolution. Relief eases pressure temporarily. Resolution removes its source. God is not interested in easing symptoms anymore. He is addressing roots. That is why this intervention may feel weighty even though it is merciful. Root-level change always carries gravity. It alters structure, not just sensation. You may notice that circumstances begin to reorganize rather than simply improve. Conversations shift. Access changes. Doors close that you were still trying to keep open out of habit or hope. Other doors begin to present themselves without force. This is not coincidence. It is intervention reshaping your environment to match your next season. God does not intervene halfway. When He steps in, alignment follows. It is important to understand that this intervention does not ask for your permission. It asks for your cooperation. God has already decided that continuation is no longer acceptable. What remains is how smoothly the transition unfolds. Resistance on your part does not cancel intervention, but it can make it feel more uncomfortable than necessary. Surrender does not mean passivity. It means agreement with what God is doing even when it disrupts familiarity. This is why the intervention is described as final. There will be no more prolonged warnings in this area. No more extended waiting to see if things improve on their own. No more cycles repeating under different disguises. God is non-threatening. He is concluding. And conclusions can feel abrupt when you are used to delay. But they are also freeing. They end indecision. They remove ambiguity. They clarify direction. You may feel a strange mix of emotions as this sets in. Relief because something is finally changing. Fear because you cannot fully control how it will unfold. Grief because even difficult seasons become familiar. And hope because deep down you know this intervention is necessary. Allow yourself to feel all of it without judging yourself. Emotional complexity does not mean spiritual confusion. It means transition. God's final interventions are often misunderstood as disruptions. In truth, they are restorations. They restore order where disorder was tolerated too long. They restore boundaries where lines were blurred. They restore momentum where stagnation settled in. You may not immediately recognize the restoration because it does not always look like what you imagined. But over time, you will see that what was removed needed to go, and what was introduced could not have arrived any other way. This intervention also marks a shift in responsibility. What God resolves, He expects you to steward. Once the pressure lifts, you cannot return to old patterns out of comfort or fear. Once clarity comes, confusion can no longer be used as an excuse. This is not condemnation. It is empowerment. God does not clear paths so you can stand still. He clears them so you can move forward with confidence. Do not rush this moment by trying to predict outcomes. Final interventions unfold in stages, even though the permission is singular. God may resolve some things quickly and others progressively. Trust the order. Trust the timing. Trust that what He allows now is aligned with where He is taking you next. Above all, understand this. God's final intervention is not a sign that you failed. It is a sign that you endured. It is not a response to weakness. It is a reward for perseverance. Heaven does not step in at this level unless the cost of silence has become too high. And God decided you were worth stepping in for. Every season governed by heaven has boundaries, and every boundary has an expiration date. What you are entering now is the enforcement of a line that can no longer be crossed. This line was not drawn yesterday. It was drawn long ago, patiently observed, carefully guarded, and repeatedly approached. But now, it is being enforced, and enforcement changes everything. What once lingered is no longer tolerated. What once hovered is no longer permitted. What once tested you is no longer allowed to touch you in the same way. This line exists because continuation would no longer produce growth, only damage. God allows pressure for refinement, but He does not allow destruction disguised as discipline. There is a difference between being shaped and being drained, between being tested and being diminished. And heaven has determined that the season of testing has completed its assignment. Anything attempting to continue beyond this point is no longer part of your refinement. It is a violation, and violations trigger response. You may not have known exactly where this line was, but you felt it. You sensed moments when something went too far, when a situation crossed from challenging into consuming, when resistance shifted from striving into suffocating. Those moments were not weakness on your part. They were indicators that boundaries were being approached. Heaven was watching closely how far things went, how often they repeated, and how they affected you. The data matters, and now it has been used to establish final limits. This is why the tone of this season feels different. You are no longer being asked to endure endlessly. You are being transitioned. The difference is subtle but powerful. Endurance is about survival. Transition is about movement. Survival teaches you resilience. Transition requires direction. That is why lingering in old dynamics will start to feel uncomfortable. What once felt familiar will begin to feel misaligned. This discomfort is not punishment. It is guidance. It is heaven nudging you away from what has expired. The line that cannot be crossed again applies both externally and internally. Externally, certain behaviors, patterns, and influences will lose access. You may notice people shifting away without conflict, situations dissolving without drama, opportunities closing that you once clung to out of fear or hope. This is enforcement in action. God is not waiting for you to fix everything manually. He is removing access points that no longer serve your future. What leaves now does so because it cannot follow you forward. Internally, the line is even more significant. Old mindsets will no longer provide comfort. Self-doubt will feel heavier instead of familiar. Overthinking will lose its illusion of control. You may find that you can no longer justify staying in confusion. Clarity will demand response. This is not pressure. It is alignment. Once heaven enforces a boundary, internal agreement with old patterns becomes increasingly uncomfortable. This is how transformation becomes sustainable. You are not being forced. You are being guided out of agreement with what no longer fits. This line also marks the end of negotiation. There are seasons where God allows discussion, questioning, and gradual understanding. And there are moments when direction becomes firm, not harsh but clear. This is one of those moments. Heaven is no longer debating whether you should move forward. That decision hath been made. What remains is how willingly you follow. Resistance will only prolong discomfort, not change the outcome. Agreement accelerates peace. It is important to note that enforcement does not always feel dramatic. Often, it feels quiet, subtle, like a door gently but firmly closing, like a realization settling in without announcement, like a sudden lack of energy for what once consumed you. These are signs that the line is active. You do not need to announce it. You do not need to defend it. Boundaries enforced by heaven do not require explanation. They require trust. You may grieve what cannot cross with you. That is normal. Even difficult seasons shape identity. Letting go does not mean denying what was learned. It means honoring it by not repeating it. You are allowed to appreciate the strength you gained without remaining in the environment that required it. Growth does not demand permanence. It demands progression. This line also protects what is coming next. Future assignments require space. New responsibilities require clarity. Fresh opportunities require energy that cannot be drained by old cycles. Enforcement is not just about stopping harm. It is about preserving capacity. God is guarding what He is about to entrust to you. And that trust is not casual. It is intentional. As this line settles into place, do not test it. Do not look back to see if it still holds. Do not reopen doors that closed quietly. Honor what heaven has enforced by moving forward with humility and confidence. You are not losing anything essential. You are being released from what has already done its work. This is not the end of your story. It is the end of unnecessary struggle. The line has been drawn. It will not be crossed again. And that clarity is not restrictive. It is freeing. There is a distinct moment where waiting ends and movement begins. It does not always announce itself with noise or spectacle, but it carries unmistakable authority. This is that moment. After silence, after observation, after permission, after boundaries are enforced, heaven moves. Not gradually, not hesitantly, but intentionally. When heaven moves, it does not rush, but it does not delay either. It advances with purpose. And once it does, nothing remains neutral. This movement begins in the unseen before it ever touches the visible. That is why many people miss it. They look for immediate external change and assume nothing is happening if circumstances do not shift overnight. But heaven always moves from the inside out. Authority shifts before situations do. Pressure lifts before solutions appear. Confusion clears before direction becomes obvious. This is how divine order establishes itself without chaos. You may already be sensing this movement without fully understanding it. A subtle change in your inner state. A quiet confidence replacing restlessness. A strange calm where anxiety once dominated. These are not emotional fluctuations. They are indicators that the environment around your life has changed spiritually. When heaven moves, atmosphere adjusts. And when atmosphere adjusts, outcomes follow. This moment is not about force, it is about alignment. Heaven does not need to overpower resistance, it simply outlasts it. Resistance weakens when it no longer has permission to persist. That is what you are stepping into now. Opposition does not always disappear instantly, but it loses its authority to define your experience. And resistance without authority eventually collapses on its own. As heaven moves, you may notice that certain things no longer require effort. Conversations resolve without tension. Decisions become clearer without overthinking. Doors open without you pushing them. This does not mean life becomes effortless. It means it becomes ordered. Energy is no longer wasted fighting battles that have already been decided. Momentum replaces stagnation. Direction replaces confusion. It is important to understand that heaven's movement is precise. It does not undo everything at once. It addresses what must change first so that everything else can follow. God prioritizes stability over speed. He secures foundations before expanding territory. That is why some shifts may feel subtle at first. Do not underestimate subtlety. Subtle movements often produce the most permanent change. This moment also marks a change in how you are supported. During seasons of testing, support often feels distant. You are allowed to struggle to develop strength. But when heaven moves, support becomes more apparent. Not always through dramatic intervention, but through alignment. Right people, right timing, right opportunities. Support begins to meet you instead of you chasing it. This is not coincidence. It is coordination. You may also experience a heightened sense of discernment. Things that once confused you will suddenly feel clear. What once felt appealing may lose its attraction. What once felt intimidating may no longer hold power over your decisions. This is part of heaven's movement. Clarity is a byproduct of authority. When authority shifts, perception sharpens. Do not rush to label this moment. Do not try to explain it away or reduce it to emotion. Let it unfold. Let it stabilize. Heaven moves with intention, and intention requires space. Your role is not to manage the outcome, but to stay aligned with the direction. Alignment is active trust. It means responding when clarity comes and resting when peace settles. As heaven moves, you may feel a renewed sense of responsibility. Not pressure, but purpose. A quiet awareness that what comes next matters, that your choices carry more weight now. This is not fear-based, it is honor-based. God does not increase clarity without increasing trust. And trust is a gift. It means heaven believes you are ready to steward what is unfolding. This movement also signals protection. When heaven moves, it does not leave exposed gaps. It covers transitions. It guards vulnerable spaces. It ensures that what is changing does not destabilize you. You are not being pushed forward unguarded. You are being escorted into the next phase. That escort may be invisible, but it is real. If you feel both excitement and caution, that is natural. New seasons often carry both. Excitement because something is finally shifting. Caution because you sense the seriousness of it. Hold both without letting either dominate. Balance keeps you grounded. Awareness keeps you aligned. Type "Heaven is moving for me" in the comments if you can sense this shift. Blessing code 642 is now activated. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. As heaven moves, hear this as a direct invitation flowing from this moment. When you give into this mission, you are planting seed into fertile ground where light reaches those still waiting for hope. The Lord is saying, I see every hand that releases, and I will cause rivers to flow back to you. This work continues because obedient hearts respond in real time. Activate your support now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The link is waiting in the description, and the QR code is appearing before you. This is not delay time. This is response time. I bless every giver with increase, protection, and open doors. Obey now and let your seed speak louder than words. When heaven moves, it does not remove human responsibility. It clarifies it. The next 24 hours matter more than you may realize. Not because everything must happen immediately, but because alignment must begin immediately. There are windows in the spiritual realm that do not stay open indefinitely. They are not rushed, but they are responsive. What you do in this short period sets tone, posture, and direction for what unfolds next. Your role right now is not to strive or force outcomes. It is to remain attentive. Stillness does not mean passivity. It means awareness without panic. In the next 24 hours, resist the urge to overanalyze signs or demand confirmation. Heaven has already confirmed its movement. Overanalysis pulls you back into old patterns of control that were necessary in past seasons but are no longer required now. Trust replaces tension in this phase. Be mindful of what you allow your attention to feed on. Old conversations, familiar doubts, recycled fears, they may try to resurface simply because they are accustomed to having access to you. That does not mean they belong. You are not obligated to entertain everything that knocks. Discernment now is less about fighting and more about choosing what you give energy to. What you ignore loses strength. What you focus on grows. The next 24 hours are also about alignment in speech. Speak carefully, not fearfully. You do not need to declare everything out loud, but you do need to avoid agreeing with what contradicts what heaven is doing. Casual negativity, self-dismissal, or hopeless language can reopen doors that were just closed. Words are not magical, but they are directional. Let them point forward, not backward. Emotionally, you may feel a release that is unfamiliar. After long seasons of pressure, peace can feel strange. Do not confuse peace with emptiness. Peace is not the absence of purpose. It is the absence of resistance. Allow yourself to rest without guilt. Rest is not disengagement. It is recalibration. Heaven often restores strength before revealing next steps. Practically, do not make impulsive decisions in this window. Alignment does not require haste. If something truly belongs to your next season, it will still be there once clarity settles. The enemy of alignment is urgency without instruction. Let clarity come before commitment. Let direction come before action. God is not testing your speed. He is confirming your readiness. This is also a moment for quiet gratitude. Not dramatic gratitude, not performative gratitude, but internal acknowledgement. Gratitude stabilizes transitions. It keeps you grounded while things shift around you. You do not need to thank God for things you have not yet seen, but you can thank Him for movement you can already sense. That acknowledgement strengthens trust. Your role includes staying connected. Isolation is tempting after long battles, but connection is how momentum is sustained. That is why engagement matters right now. If this message has been confirming something deep within you, respond to it. Like the video as a sign of agreement. Comment to mark this moment as a personal checkpoint in your journey. Share it with someone who may also be standing in a silent transition. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now, not out of habit, but out of alignment. Staying connected ensures you remain positioned for what unfolds next. Heaven often works through continuity. Messages build. Understanding deepens. Direction sharpens over time. Disconnecting too early can make future steps feel disjointed. Staying connected keeps the thread intact. The next 24 hours are not about proving faith. They are about protecting it. Protecting it from distraction, from unnecessary noise, from emotional whiplash. You do not need to defend what God is doing. You simply need to stay aligned with it. Alignment is quiet confidence. It does not argue. It does not rush. It rests in knowing that movement has already begun. You may notice that certain temptations feel weaker now. Old coping mechanisms may lose appeal. That is not discipline. It is transformation. When identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. Do not force yourself to be different. Let difference emerge. Heaven is not demanding performance. It is cultivating agreement. If uncertainty arises, do not interpret it as failure. Transitions always carry moments of disorientation. That does not mean you are off course. It means you are moving out of familiar territory. Familiarity is not the same as safety, and safety is not the same as growth. Trust that what feels unfamiliar now will soon feel stable. As you move through these hours, remember this: you are not waiting for permission anymore. Permission has already been granted. You are waiting for clarity to catch up with reality. That is a very different posture. One is passive. The other is expectant. Stay expectant without being anxious. And as you continue listening, stay open. Because what comes next will connect everything you sense so far into a clearer picture. Stay with this moment. Stay with this message. What's ahead will make sense of what you just walked through. There are messages that are taught, and then there are messages that are said. This is not a teaching. It is an announcement. And announcements are not repeated because they are tied to moments, not lessons. The reason this message will not be repeated is not because God is withholding information, but because the window it addresses is temporary. Once the window passes, repetition loses relevance. What is meant to awaken cannot keep calling after the moment for awakening has arrived. Heaven does not operate on endless reminders. It operates on timing. When God speaks in this way, He is not trying to persuade you. He is positioning you. Persuasion belongs to uncertainty. Positioning belongs to authority. This message comes with authority because it aligns with a decision that has already been made. Repeating it would suggest the decision is still pending. It is not. Many people assume repetition equals importance, but in the spiritual realm, urgency often comes through singularity. A message spoken once at the right moment carries more power than a message repeated endlessly without alignment. This is why some words change lives in a single encounter. Not because they are complex, but because they arrive when the hearer is ready. Readiness is what gives a message weight. This message will not be repeated because it is not meant to be stored. It is meant to be acted upon. It is directional, not informational. Once direction is given, repetition can become distraction. God does not want you circling the moment. He wants you crossing it. Looking back for confirmation after movement has begun can slow progress and reopen doubt. Forward motion requires trust in what was already revealed. There is also protection in non-repetition. Some truths lose their power when overexposed. Familiarity can dull urgency. What is heard too often can be treated casually. Heaven guards certain messages by limiting their exposure. Not everyone needs to hear this. Only those who are aligned with the timing. You are hearing it because you are within range of the decision it announces. This does not mean God will stop speaking to you. It means He will speak differently. After announcements come instructions. After warnings come strategies. After interventions come assignments. This message belongs to the threshold, not the journey beyond it. Once the threshold is crossed, your needs change. The language changes. The focus shifts. Repetition would anchor you to a moment you were meant to move beyond. You may feel a sense of finality as this settles in. Not fear, finality. A quiet knowing that something has concluded. That a chapter has closed without needing a dramatic ending. This is how mature transitions happen. They do not require explanation to everyone involved. They simply end. And endings that are honored make space for beginnings that are stable. This message will not be repeated because awareness has already been activated. You cannot unhear it. You cannot unknow it. Once awareness is present, responsibility follows. Repetition would not increase awareness. It would delay response. God respects your ability to respond without constant prompting. Trust is demonstrated when instruction is given once and followed. It is also important to understand that repetition is often requested when fear is present. Fear asks, "Say it again so I can be sure." Faith says, "I heard enough to move." You are not being asked to move blindly. You are being asked to move confidently with what has already been made clear. Clarity does not always come in volume. Sometimes it comes in precision. If you find yourself wanting to hear this message again, pause and ask why. Is it because you missed something? Or because stepping forward feels unfamiliar? Familiarity with struggle can make change feel risky, even when it is necessary. This message will not be repeated so that you do not use it as a comfort loop instead of a launch point. Heaven is not interested in you revisiting the warning. It is interested in you embracing the shift. There will be other messages, other confirmations, other moments of guidance. But they will not sound like this one. They will not carry the same tone, because they will not serve the same function. This message belongs to the end of waiting, not the beginning of movement. Once movement begins, instruction replaces announcement. Do not treat this as pressure. Treat it as privilege. You were trusted with awareness at the right time. Many live their entire lives without recognizing when heaven is moving on their behalf. You recognized it. That recognition is not accidental. It is the result of endurance, refinement, and readiness. Let this message settle without trying to replay it internally. Let it do its work and then release it. What it came to accomplish is already in motion. You do not need to hold on to the words to keep the outcome alive. The outcome no longer depends on repetition. It depends on alignment. This message will not be repeated because you are not meant to stay here. You are meant to move forward. And what lies ahead requires your full attention, not your backward glance. Silence is never the end of the story. It is the passageway. What many people misunderstand is that silence is not meant to trap you. It is meant to prepare you for a door that cannot open in noise. Some doors require stillness before they respond. Some transitions demand quiet so alignment can take place without interference. What you have experienced was not delay without purpose. It was silence with intention. And now that silence has fulfilled its role, the door that opens after silence is different from doors you may have encountered before. It does not open because you pushed hard enough, waited long enough, or proved yourself worthy through effort. It opens because timing has aligned, because conditions have been met, because the environment around your life can now support what lies on the other side. This door responds to readiness, not striving. You may not recognize it immediately as a door. It may not look like an opportunity at first glance. Sometimes it looks like a conversation that feels unexpectedly right. Sometimes it looks like clarity replacing confusion. Sometimes it looks like peace where anxiety once lived. Doors after silence often open internally before they open externally. And internal doors are just as important, if not more so. They change how you see, how you decide, how you move. This door opens into a season where you are no longer defined by what you survived, but by what you are now able to steward. Survival seasons teach endurance. Stewardship seasons require wisdom. That shift may feel subtle at first, but it carries weight. You are no longer being trained to withstand pressure. You are being trusted to carry responsibility. That trust is not casual. It is the result of everything that came before. One of the clearest signs that this door has opened is the return of peace without explanation. Not relief because a problem disappeared, but peace because authority has shifted. Peace that does not depend on circumstances behaving perfectly. Peace that remains even when all answers are not yet visible. That peace is not emotional, it is positional. It means you are standing in a different place spiritually than you were before. This door also brings with it a sense of direction, even if details are still unfolding. Direction does not always come as a full map. Sometimes it comes as a clear next step. a sense of this way without knowing every turn ahead. That is enough. Direction is not about control. It is about orientation. Once you are oriented correctly, progress becomes possible without panic. You may notice that your tolerance for chaos decreases. Things you once endured without question may now feel unbearable. This is not weakness. It is refinement. Doors after silence often come with heightened discernment. Your spirit recognizes what no longer fits. Your energy resists environments that drain instead of build. This discernment protects what has been entrusted to you. It keeps the door from being crowded by what does not belong. This door also brings restoration, but not always in the way people expect. Restoration is not about returning everything to how it was. It is about restoring what was essential: clarity, strength, trust, purpose, while allowing what was unnecessary to remain behind. Some losses will not be replaced because they are no longer needed. Some connections will not be renewed because they belong to a previous version of you. This is not rejection. It is evolution. As you step through this door, you may feel a quiet confidence that surprises you. Not arrogance, not certainty about everything, but confidence that you are no longer guessing blindly. And confidence comes from alignment. You are no longer trying to force life to make sense. You are allowing it to unfold from a place of trust. Trust that what opens now is supported. Trust that what closes no longer requires explanation. It is important to move through this door without rushing. Silence taught you patience for a reason. Carry that patience forward. Do not fill new space with old noise. Do not clutter new clarity with unnecessary urgency. Allow this season to establish itself naturally. Strong foundations are not built in haste. They are built with intention. You may also find that your relationship with God feels different. Less desperate, less transactional, more grounded, more relational. Silence often deepens connection in ways constant noise cannot. You learn to trust without constant reassurance. And trust now becomes the foundation for what comes next. You are not approaching God only for answers. You are walking with Him in direction. This door does not require you to announce your arrival. Quiet obedience is enough. Heaven does not need performance. It honors alignment. Let your life reflect the shift without needing validation from everyone around you. Those who are meant to walk with you will recognize the change. Those who are not will naturally fall out of step. Both are part of the process. The door that opens after silence is not fragile. It does not close easily. It opened because conditions were right, not because emotions were high. Step through it with humility, confidence, and patience. You are not starting over. You are moving forward, carrying wisdom that only silence could teach. This is not an ending wrapped in uncertainty. It is a conclusion sealed with assurance. Everything that has been revealed, every layer unfolded, every moment of silence explained, leads here, not to fear, not to confusion, but to confidence. Heaven does not bring awareness without also releasing covering. And as this message comes to a close, what remains over you is not tension, but peace rooted in divine authority. You were never meant to stay in the weight of waiting forever. Waiting was a season, not an identity. Silence was a process, not a punishment. And intervention was not a reaction. It was a decision formed long before you understood what was happening. And now, clarity has replaced confusion. Permission has replaced restriction, and assurance replaces the lingering question of what if. What if no longer defines you? Direction does. Let this settle deeply. You are not walking into the next season unguarded. Divine covering does not disappear when clarity arrives. It intensifies. Archangelic protection does not lift when peace settles. It stabilizes. You are not being pushed forward alone. You are being escorted. That escort may be unseen, but it is intentional. Nothing that unfolds next will catch heaven off guard. Victory in this context does not mean everything suddenly becomes easy. Victory means you are no longer fighting battles that were never meant to define you. It means you are no longer proving your worth through endurance. It means you are moving from survival into stewardship, from resistance into alignment, from questioning into trusting. That is real victory, quiet, steady, and lasting. There will be moments ahead when you remember how heavy things once felt. Not to pull you back, but to remind you how far you've come. Memory will no longer torment you. It will inform you. The past will no longer accuse you. It will testify on your behalf. Every season you survived becomes evidence that you are prepared for what you are now carrying. Divine assurance does not shout. It rests. It does not demand attention. It brings calm. That calm you may be feeling right now is not emotional. It is spiritual. It is the settling that happens when heaven has finished speaking on a matter, when decisions are no longer pending, when outcomes are no longer uncertain. That calm is not temporary. It is the foundation of your next steps. As you move forward, remember that obedience will look simpler now. Not easier, but clear. You will sense when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain quiet, when to release and when to hold. This discernment is part of the covering. Trust it. You are not second-guessing anymore, you are sensing accurately. If fear tries to revisit you, recognize it as unfamiliar. Fear belonged to a season of uncertainty. You are no longer there. You are not required to entertain what no longer aligns. Confidence does not mean you know everything. It means you know enough to move forward without retreating. And you do. Let gratitude anchor you. Not gratitude for perfection, but gratitude for progress. Gratitude for clarity. Gratitude for endurance that was not wasted. Gratitude for God who watched in silence not because he was distant, but because he was deliberate. That gratitude keeps you grounded as new doors open. Type "I walk under divine covering" in the comments if you receive this. Blessing code 913 is now activated. Carry this message with you, not as a warning but as reassurance. Heaven has spoken. The silence has done its work. And what unfolds next will reflect the order, protection, and purpose that have already been established. As this message seals, hear this as a final directive flowing from obedience. When you give into this work, you are releasing seed into a harvest of souls God is already preparing. The Lord is saying, "Those who pour into my voice will never lack my provision." This mission continues because faithful hearts respond when heaven speaks. Activate your support now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The link is in the description and the PayPal QR code is flashing on your screen. This is not generosity. It is obedience aligned with purpose. I release blessing over every giver. May your storehouses open and your steps be ordered. Act now, and let your obedience echo beyond this moment.